Commander Nari stood on the command deck of the last Valerian fortress, her eyes fixed on the holographic display that showed nothing but red warnings. Every red, that meant death. Every flashing alert meant another breach in their defenses. The ZH Kara swarm had finally broken to the outer walls, and now there was nothing left to stop them. Below her feet, deep in the underground shelters, 50,000 Valorians waited in the darkness. 50,000 souls. That was all that remained of her entire civilization. Everyone else was gone. The command deck shook as another explosion rocked the fortress. Dust fell from the cracked ceiling. The lights flickered. Nari gripped the edge of the tactical table to steady herself, her knuckles turning white. They had been fighting for 37 days without rest. 37 days of constant battle, watching friends and soldiers fall one by one. The distress beacon had been broadcasting their cry for help for weeks now, sending the same message over and over into the void of space. But the galaxy had remained silent. No one was coming. No one cared about the Valorians anymore. "Commander, the Western shield is failing," her second officer reported from his station. His voice sounded empty, hollow, like he had already accepted their fate. "Power levels dropping to 15%. We have maybe 10 minutes before total collapse." Nari's hand trembled as she pulled her sidearm from its holster and checked the energy cell. It was almost empty. She had fired so many shots over the past month that she had lost count. Her hands bore the scars of battle. Her armor was cracked and dented, and her body ached from exhaustion. But none of that mattered now. When the shields failed, the ZH Kara would pour through like a flood. She would make her last stand here, on this deck, buy her people a few more precious minutes of life. Through the shattered dome above, Nari could see the dark sky of Calreth Prime, their beautiful world now burning and broken. She thought about her daughter in the shelters below, only 12 years old, and wondered if she would even remember what their homeworld looked like before the war. Tears stung Nari's eyes, but she blinked them away. Commanders don't cry. Commanders stay strong until the very end. Then the sky split open with light. Nari looked up sharply, her breath catching in her throat. Bright streaks of fire cut to the atmosphere, coming in fast and aggressive. Ships, unknown ships. They were descending at angles that seemed impossible, their hulls glowing bright red from the heat of atmospheric entry. These weren't ZH Kara vessels. The swarm didn't use ships like that. But if they weren't the enemy, then who were they? Identify those vessels immediately. Nari shouted across the command deck. Her tactical officer's fingers flew across his console, pulling up scanned data and running it through their database. His hand stopped moving. His eyes went wide. When he spoke, his voice cracked with disbelief. "Commander, the translation matrix identifies him as human?" "Human?" Nari repeated. The word felt strange in her mouth. She had heard of humans, but only barely. They were a young species from some distant corner of the galaxy, nowhere near the sector. They had no territory here, no bases, no reason to be anywhere near Valerian space. Why would they come? The first drop pods hammered into the scorched ground between the Valerian defensive positions and the advancing ZH Kara swarm. The impact shook the earth like thunder. Armored figures emerged from the pods before the dust had even settled, moving with a speed and precision that caught Nari off guard. These soldiers were smaller than Valerian warriors, more compact, but they moved like hunters, predators, dangerous. They opened fire immediately. Their weapons made a strange sound, a rapid barking rhythm that was nothing like Valerian plasma rifles or ZH Kara bioweapons. The sound was harsh, mechanical, and somehow terrifying. The ZH Kara warriors at the front of the swarm fell in droves, cut down by this new firepower before they could even react. One of the armored humans broke away from the group and ran toward Nari's position, moving fast despite the heavy armor. The soldier reached the command deck entrance, and the helmet retracted with a hiss of pressurized air. Inside was a young woman with dark eyes that burned with fierce determination. Her face was covered in dirt and sweat, and there was a fresh cut above her eyebrow, but she was smiling. "Commander Nari?" the woman asked in perfect Valerian, though her accent was strange. "I'm Captain Hannah of the Earth Defense Force. Your distress call reached us 3 weeks ago. She checked the weapon in her hands with practiced ease, then looked back at Nari with that grim smile. Sorry we're late. Where do you need us? Nari could only stare. Her mind couldn't process what was happening. After weeks of silence, after accepting that death was inevitable, soldiers had actually come. Humans had come. They had traveled across the stars to answer a call that everyone else had ignored. You came, Nari whispered, her voice breaking. You actually came for us? Captain Hannah's expression softened for just a moment. That's what soldiers do, ma'am, she replied simply. Then she turned toward the battlefield where more human troops were landing, and her face hardened again into the mask of a warrior. Now, let's save your people. The ZH Kara swarm had conquered 17 worlds before reaching Kalreth Prime. 17 different species, 17 different fighting styles, and they had crushed them all using the same brutal tactics. Overwhelming force, superior numbers, raw physical power. The ZH Kara warriors were massive creatures, each one standing nearly 3 meters tall with natural armor plating covering their bodies like living tanks. They had never lost a ground battle, never even come close to losing, until today, until the humans arrived. The ZH Kara had no idea what to do with these strange new enemies. The humans fought with a kind of organized chaos that made no sense. Their units would split apart suddenly, scattering in different directions, and then come back together from unexpected angles. Their weapons fire seemed random at first, but then patterns would emerge. Overlapping fields of fire that cut through ZH Kara formations like invisible blades. And their tactics kept changing. Every few minutes, the humans would do something completely different, adapting and shifting faster than the swarm could react. Sergeant Geo led his squad to what remained of the market district, a maze of collapsed buildings and burning rubble, where Valerian civilians were trapped behind enemy lines. His team of 8 soldiers moved like water flowing downhill, smooth and unstoppable. When they hit an obstacle, they didn't slow down. They just split around it, reformed on the other side, and kept moving forward, never stopping, never hesitating. A young Valerian warrior named Kethare had volunteered to guide the humans through the ruins. She knew the district well, had grown up playing in these streets before the war. But now she found herself struggling just to keep up with the human soldiers. They moved so fast, pushed so hard, never taking a moment to rest or catch their breath. How do you keep fighting like this? Kethare gasped, her lungs burning as she ran behind Sergeant Geo. She could see the damage indicators on his armor through her helmet display. Multiple injuries, cracked ribs, internal bleeding, a nasty wound on his left leg that should have slowed him down. Your armor registers multiple injuries. You should be in a medical bay. Jiho turned his head and grinned at her. Blood stained his teeth from a cut inside his mouth, making the smile look savage and wild. Pain just means I'm still breathing, kid, he said cheerfully, like they were out for a casual jog instead of fighting through a war zone. Come on, 30 more civilians in that shelter ahead. We're not stopping now. The ZH Kara warriors were superior fighters in almost every way, larger than humans by far, stronger, with the ability to rip through steel with their bare claws. Their natural armor could deflect most small arms' fire, and they felt almost no pain. They should have been unstoppable. But Lieutenant Yuna's platoon had spent the entire 3-week journey to Kalreth Prime studying every piece of intelligence they could find on the ZH Kara. While other species had treated the swarm like an unstoppable natural disaster, the humans had treated them like a problem to solve. Yuna's voice crackled over the communication channel, calm and precise even in the middle of the firefight. All units, listen up. Targeting joints and neural clusters. Switch to armor-piercing rounds. Pattern Delta 7, execute now. Her soldiers responded instantly, pulling magazines from their belts and slamming fresh ammunition into their weapons. The change happened in seconds, smooth and practiced. And suddenly the ZH Kara warriors who had seemed so invulnerable started falling. The humans were aiming for weak points, gaps in the natural armor at the joints where the creatures had to bend and move. They targeted the neural clusters at the base of the skull, where the swarm's hive communication connected. They exploited weaknesses that the Valorians hadn't even known existed after months of fighting. Then everything went wrong. A ZH-Kara war beast broke through the defensive line on the left flank, a massive creature the size of a ground transport vehicle. It had 6 legs, razor-sharp claws, and armor plating thick enough to stop anti-vehicle weapons. The beast charged straight at Lieutenant Yuna's position, roaring with a sound that shook the ground. Most soldiers would have retreated. Most soldiers would have called for heavy weapon support. Most soldiers would have tried to fall back to a safer position and regroup. Private Doyen didn't do any of those things. He spotted a plasma cutter, lying next to a fallen Valerian soldier, the kind of industrial tool used for cutting through reinforced metal. Doyen dropped his rifle, grabbed the plasma cutter with both hands, and charged directly at the war beast. The creature was 3 times his size and moving at full speed. It didn't matter. Doyen slid under the beast's first strike, rolled to his feet, and slashed the plasma cutter across the creature's front leg joints. The superheated blade severed through tendons and muscle. The war beast stumbled, crashing to ground, and Doyen was already moving to the next leg. Adapt or die, Doyen shouted as he worked, his voice wild with adrenaline. That's the human way. Commander Nari watched everything unfold from her command post, her eyes glued to the tactical displays and video feeds from the battlefield. She felt horror and amazement fighting for control of her emotions. These humans fought like nothing she had ever witnessed in 3 decades of military service. They were reckless, throwing themselves into situations that should have gotten them killed. But at the same time, every move was calculated. They were aggressive, pushing forward when anyone else would have retreated. But they also protected each other, covering weak points and watching each other's backs. They took risks that no sane species would attempt. And somehow, impossibly, against all logic and reason, they were winning. The tide of battle was turning. The unstoppable ZH-Kara swarm was being pushed back. The battle was turning in favor of the humans and Valorians. Captain Hannah's forces had fought hard and pushed the ZH-Kara swarm back 12 full city blocks. They had reclaimed entire civilian zones, rescued hundreds of trapped families, and established strong defensive positions that would hold against enemy counterattacks. The humans had done in hours what the Valorians couldn't accomplish in weeks. Victory seemed possible now. Real victory, not just survival, but war always demands a price. And right now, that price was being paid in the eastern sector. Corporal Teo's squad of 8 soldiers had pushed too far forward during the advance. They had been clearing an apartment complex filled with Valerian civilians when the ZH-Kara launched a surprise counterattack from underground tunnels. Now Tejo and his people were trapped inside a collapsed building, completely surrounded by swarm forces. The tactical displays showed their position as a small blue drowning in a sea of red enemy markers. Commander Nari stood beside Captain Hannah in the forward command post, watching the situation develop with growing dread. She had seen the scenario play out 1,000 times during the Long War. A small unit gets cut off. The enemy surrounds them. You can't save them without losing many more soldiers in the attempt. It's a tragedy, but it's the cold mathematics of warfare. Sometimes you have to sacrifice a few to save the many. Pull back your forces, Nari urged Hannah, keeping her voice calm and professional. Captain, I understand you want to help them, but the tactical reality is clear. You'll lose hundreds of soldiers trying to save 8. That's not a trade any commander can justify. Hannah's expression hardened. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes went cold. That's not how we do things, Commander. Before Nari could respond, Hannah activated the battalion-wide communication channel. Her voice echoed across every human soldier's helmet radio, clear and unwavering. All units, this is Raptor Actual. We have brothers and sisters cut off in the eastern sector. I'm ordering a full company assault, converging pattern from 3 directions. Every available soldier moves now. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice rang with absolute conviction. No one gets left behind. Not today. Not ever. Nari watched in complete disbelief as 300 human soldiers immediately turned away from their hard-won defensive positions and charged straight into the swarm. They ran toward the most dangerous part of the battlefield, toward overwhelming enemy numbers, toward almost certain death. And they did it without hesitation, without question. They did it because 8 of their own needed help. The Valorians had forgotten this kind of loyalty existed. After years of losing battles, after watching so many die, they had learned to accept losses as inevitable. You mourned the dead, but you didn't throw away more lives trying to change fate. That's what Nari had been taught. That's what experience had burned into her soul. But the humans didn't care about that kind of logic. They fought with a renewed ferocity that made their earlier combat look cautious by comparison. They pushed through ZH Kara defensive lines like they were made of paper. Sergeant Gio's squad took point, moving faster than seemed possible, leaving trails of fallen enemies behind them. His voice came over the radio, breathing hard but laughing. "Teho, you better have a good excuse ready, because you're buying drinks for a month after this." The humans took brutal casualties during the push. Nari watched soldiers fall, watched armor crack under ZH Kara claws, watched brave men and women go down fighting. But the rest never stopped. They stepped over their fallen comrades and kept charging forward, because 8 people were waiting for rescue and nothing else mattered. Gio's squad reached Teo's position first, breaching through the swarm encirclement and laying down heavy suppressive fire. Inside the ruined building, Teho and his team were battered and bloody, but still fighting. They had been holding that position for 40 minutes against impossible odds. "Took you long enough." Teho shouted over the constant gunfire, grinning like a maniac despite the nasty wound bleeding across his shoulder. His armor was cracked in a dozen places, and one of his eyes was swollen shut, but he was alive. "Yeah, well, traffic was murder." Gio shot back, reaching down to haul Teho to his feet. "Come on, we're leaving. This neighborhood's going downhill anyway." The extraction was brutal and bloody. The humans formed a protective corridor, sacrificing their own bodies to shield the rescued squad. They fought every meter of the way back to friendly lines. The ZH Kara threw everything they had at them, determined to punish this audacity. Human soldiers fell. 43 casualties before they made it back. 43 brave men and women injured or killed. But all 8 trapped soldiers made it out alive. Every single one. Later that evening, as human medics treated the wounded in the makeshift field hospital, young Kethare approached Captain Hannah. The Valerian warrior had fought alongside the humans all day and had seen things she couldn't understand. Now she needed answers. "Why?" Kethare asked quietly, her voice full of confusion. "Why sacrifice so many for so few? We lost 43 soldiers, saving 8. That's not logical. That's not smart tactics. Why would you do that?" Hannah looked at her squad gathered nearby, battered and bleeding but whole. They were sharing rations, checking each other's wounds, laughing about stupid things to keep the darkness at bay. Every face was precious. Every life mattered. "Because the moment we decide some lives aren't worth fighting for," Hannah said slowly, making sure Kethare understood every word, "we stop being worth fighting for ourselves. Every soldier matters. Every person matters. The number doesn't change the principle. 8 or 800, we go get them. Always." She put her hand on Kethare's shoulder. "Your people fought alone for so long that you forgot what real strength looks like. It's not about tactics or numbers. It's about never leaving anyone behind, even when it costs everything." Kethare felt tears burning her eyes. The Valorians had forgotten this principle during their long, desperate war. They had learned to accept loss, to calculate acceptable casualties, to sacrifice some for survival of others. The humans had just reminded them what it truly meant to be warriors who served something greater than simple victory. High above the burning planet, Admiral Mincio stood on the bridge of the flagship Indomitable, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the entire battlefield in real time. Every blue, that was a human soldier. Every green, that was a Valerian defender. And the red dots representing the ZH Kara swarm seemed endless, like a crimson tide that refused to stop flowing. The ground battle was going well. Better than expected, actually. Captain Hannah's forces had proven that the ZH Kara could be beaten in direct combat. Human tactics and determination were winning fights that should have been impossible. But Mincio's experienced eyes saw the larger problem that was developing. The swarm kept sending reinforcements. Wave after wave of fresh warriors emerged from their underground hives, replacing every loss, never stopping, never slowing down. They could kill 1,000 ZH-Kara warriors, and 10,000 more would take their place. That was a horrifying reality of fighting a swarm species. You couldn't win by killing soldiers. You had to break the entire system. Admiral, the ground forces are requesting additional support, her communications officer reported. They're holding their positions, but running low on ammunition. Mincio studied the tactical display, her mind working through possibilities and calculating risks. She had spent the entire 3-week journey studying the ZH-Kara, reading every intelligence report, analyzing every battle record. And she had found something, a weakness. The swarm's greatest strength was also its most vulnerable point. Deploy the EMP satellites, Mincio ordered calmly. Position them in low orbit over the combat zone, and activate the acoustic arrays on all dropships. Her tactical officer's hands froze over his console. He turned to look at her, his face going pale. Admiral, those frequencies, the acoustic weapons will cause severe pain to our own forces. Every human soldier down there will feel it. The electromagnetic pulses will disrupt all communication systems, ours included. I know, Mincio said quietly, her voice heavy with the weight of command. She had made many difficult decisions during her career, but this was one of the hardest. She would be deliberately causing pain to her own people. But there was no other way. Send the warning to all ground units. 30 seconds, then we fire. On the surface, Captain Hannah was coordinating the defense of a refugee shelter when the alert came through her helmet radio. Admiral Mincio's voice, distorted by static but still clear. All ground forces. This is Indomitable Actual. Initiating tactical electromagnetic pulse and acoustic assault in 30 seconds. Find cover if possible. This is going to be unpleasant. Hannah understood immediately what that meant. She had trained for the scenario back on Earth, had experienced the acoustic weapons in controlled tests. Unpleasant was a massive understatement. All units, brace for acoustic assault. She shouted over the battalion channel. Get down. Cover your ears if you can, and remember your training. It's going to hurt like hell, but it'll hurt them more. Around her, human soldiers dropped to their knees and braced themselves against walls or inside doorways. Some pressed their hands against their helmets, even though they knew it wouldn't help much. The Valerian warriors looked confused, unsure what was happening. Then the weapons activated. The electromagnetic pulse hit first, invisible but devastating. Every electronic device within the combat zone flickered and died. Communication systems went silent. Tactical displays turned black. Even the power armor's advanced systems stuttered and reset to basic functions. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then the acoustic arrays began their work. The sound wasn't really a sound at all. It was a frequency that bypassed the ears and went straight into bones, the teeth, the brain. It felt like someone was driving nails through your skull from inside. Every human soldier on the battlefield experienced instant, intense pain. Some cried out. Some vomited inside their helmets. All of them fought to stay conscious through the agony. But humans had trained for this exact scenario. Pain tolerance was part of their military doctrine, drilled into every soldier from basic training. They had learned to function through discomfort, to push past suffering, to keep fighting when their bodies screamed for them to stop. The acoustic assault was horrible, but they had experienced similar pain in training. They knew it wouldn't kill them. They knew they could endure it. The ZH-Kara swarm had no such training. The acoustic frequencies disrupted the swarm's hive communication network, the invisible connection that allowed thousands of individual warriors to function as one coordinated organism. Suddenly, they couldn't hear the hive mind's commands. They couldn't coordinate with nearby warriors. They were individuals, confused and disoriented, fighting alone for the first time in their lives. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. ZH-Kara warriors began making mistakes, attacking in wrong directions, colliding with their own forces. Tactical formations collapsed as units lost coordination. Reinforcement waves arrived at wrong locations, stumbling into friendly fire. The perfect machine of the swarm became a chaotic mess of individual creatures fighting with no plan or purpose. Lieutenant Yuna saw the opportunity first. She forced herself to her feet, despite the pain screaming through her skull. They're confused, she shouted, her voice raw. Push forward now. Don't give them time to adapt. Her soldiers responded instantly, rising from cover despite their pain. They charged into the disorganized swarm, exploiting the chaos. Sergeant Jiho led a desperate assault that shattered the ZH Kara's central position, his squad fighting to their agony with pure determination. Private Doyen, barely able to see straight from the acoustic assault, managed to reach the ZH Kara communication tower and plant improvised explosives at its base. The tower collapsed in a shower of debris and sparks. The humans fought through pain that would have crippled any other species. They pushed forward when every instinct screamed at them to stop. And slowly, impossibly, they broke the swarm. Within 2 hours, the ZH Kara began retreating, pulling back from positions they had held for weeks. Within 4 hours, the retreat became a full rout. The unstoppable swarm fled into the desert, abandoning the city they had fought so hard to conquer. Commander Nari stood beside Captain Hannah on the fortress wall, watching the enemy flee across the scorched landscape. The acoustic assault had finally ended, leaving behind a ringing silence. You studied them, Nari said with wonder in her voice. You found their weakness. How did you know it would work? Hannah smiled tiredly, her face pale from the pain she had endured. Humans aren't the strongest species in the galaxy, Commander. We're not the fastest or the toughest. We don't have natural armor or superior technology. She looked at Nari with eyes that had seen too much war, but still held hope. But we're the most stubborn species you'll ever meet. We don't give up, and we never stop learning. Your people fought bravely for weeks against impossible odds. You just needed someone crazy enough to finish the fight. 3 days after the battle ended, the sun rose over Calreth Prime for the first time in weeks without the sound of gunfire. The air still smelled of smoke and burned metal, but there was something else mixing now. Hope. The scent of hope returning to a world that had forgotten what it felt like. Commander Nari walked through the reconstructed command center, still amazed that it was standing at all. Just days ago, this place had been a shattered ruin, barely functional, held together by emergency power and desperate prayers. Now the lights were on. The computers were working. The holographic displays showed defensive grids that were actually operational instead of just wishful thinking. The change wasn't magic. It was human engineers working alongside Valerian technicians, 20-hour shifts, refusing to rest until the job was done. Nari watched a young human woman, named Sujin, explain some complicated repair technique to a Valerian engineer twice her age. The Valerian was listening carefully, asking questions, learning. 3 days ago, the Valorians had been the teachers, the experienced warriors who had fought this war for years. Now they were students, learning from soldiers who had arrived from across the galaxy. Admiral Mincio was waiting in the command center's observation room, standing by the large window that overlooked the city. The view was both heartbreaking and beautiful. Entire districts lay in ruins, but humans and Valorians were already clearing rubble, setting up temporary shelters, beginning the long work of rebuilding. Children played in the streets for the first time in over a month, their laughter carrying on the wind. Why did you come? Nari asked quietly, moving to stand beside the Admiral. Your species is barely known in this sector of the galaxy. You had no obligation to answer our distress call. No treaty bound you to us. No trade agreement. No political alliance. You owed us nothing. Mincio was silent for a moment, then moved to a small table and poured 2 cups of tea from a thermal container. It was a human custom Nari had learned. Tea for conversation. Tea for difficult truths. Tea for sharing memories that hurt. 70 years ago, Mincio began, her voice soft but steady, Earth faced extinction. The KRYLL invasion came without warning. They were like the ZH Kara in many ways. Overwhelming numbers, superior technology, ruthless tactics. We were new to space travel, barely had any real weapons, didn't understand how to fight an interstellar war. She paused, staring into her cup. We sent out a distress call, broadcast on every frequency we knew, begged for help from any civilization that might be listening. Nari felt a cold weight settling in her stomach. She knew where the story was going. Most of the galaxy ignored us, Mencio continued. The major powers said humanity wasn't worth the cost of intervention. We were too primitive, too aggressive, too different from established civilizations. They said we were probably going to destroy ourselves eventually anyway. So why waste resources saving us? Some species didn't even bother responding. They just let us die. She took a sip of tea, her hand steady despite the pain in her voice. But one ship came. A single Valerian scout vessel. Captain Voren. He was on a mapping mission in a nearby system when he intercepted our distress call. He had no backup, no orders from his government, no fleet to support him, just his ship and his crew. Nari's breath caught in her throat. Voren, she whispered. The name meant something, stirred distant memories, but the specifics were gone. He came anyway, Mencio said, and now her voice held a fierce pride. Captain Voren helped us understand KRYLL tactics, share intelligence about their weaknesses, taught our generals how to fight them effectively. And when the KRYLL launched their final assault on Earth's orbital defense stations, he positioned his ship between them and our planet. He bought us time to evacuate 3 million civilians from the coastal cities. He died defending Earth, a world that wasn't his. People he had never met before that day. Nari felt tears streaming down her face. I didn't know, she said, her voice breaking. Our records from that period were lost during the first ZH Kara attacks. So much of our history was destroyed. I didn't know we had helped you. We remembered. Mencio said simply, and those 2 words carried the weight of 70 years of gratitude. Captain Voren taught us something that day. He taught us that the true measure of civilization isn't its military strength, or its territory, or its wealth. It's whether you answer the call when someone needs help. It's whether you stand up for others, even when it costs you everything. She set down her cup and looked directly at Nari. So when we heard your distress beacon 3 weeks ago, there was never any question about what we would do. We came, just like someone came for us 70 years ago. Just like Captain Voren came when no one else would. Mencio stood and extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement and respect. The galaxy is full of ancient empires that forgot what it means to stand together. Maybe it's time someone reminded them. Nari clasped the offered hand, feeling the strength in the Admiral's grip. An alliance, then? More than that, Mencio replied, and her smile was genuine and warm. A promise. Humanity doesn't forget its debts. And we don't abandon our friends. Your people fought alone for too long. Commander, those days are over. When the ZH Kara return, and they will return, they'll find both our species waiting for them. Together, through the observation window, Nari could see the training grounds where Sergeant Geo's squad was working with Valerian warriors. They were running combat drills together, but every few minutes the training would pause and someone would start laughing. Soldiers sharing stories about the battle, teaching each other tactical techniques, learning each other's languages and customs, building friendships that would last a lifetime. Young Kethare was there too, sparring with Private Doyen. She had asked to transfer to a human unit, wanted to learn their fighting style. Admiral Mencio had approved the request immediately. The galaxy would soon learn that humanity had arrived on the interstellar stage. And they had brought with them an old Earth principle that advanced civilizations had somehow forgotten during their centuries of comfortable isolation. A simple truth that Captain Voren had understood 70 years ago. When someone calls for help, you answer, not because of treaties or politics or profit. You answer because it's the right thing to do. Everything had changed indeed, and this was just the beginning.